If you'd like to work along with me at home, open the Project Files folder, Lesson 7 folder, and then Printing 02. If you're following along from the previous video, you can just continue to work in the workbook we had open there. So here's the problem. When you work in a word processing document like Microsoft Word, as you type, when you reach the right edge of the page, the text simply wraps and goes down to the next line. When you reach the bottom of the page, then Word just creates a new page to continue to work in. But in Excel, we don't have that luxury, because there's over 16,000 columns and over 1 million rows, and there's nothing to tell us where the edge of the page is. The edge of the page is actually right here someplace, so that when you're printing, it actually stops right here at column H, or somewhere in that vicinity. And then these two columns here don't fit on the page. Now, we really wouldn't want to trade the ability to work with 16,000 columns to cramp Excel into working with just this little bitty section right here. So what we're going to do then is just go ahead and work throughout the entire workbook and then solve the problem of how it prints when it comes time to print it. Well, let's take a look at how this document will print. We're going to do print preview, and here in Backstage View we can see the first page of the printout. Page 1 looks pretty good. When we go to page 2, that one doesn't look too bad, but when we go to page 3, here you can see the top right edge of the first page, just hanging out there all by itself. Not so good. And we go over to page 4, this is even worse. This is the top right part of the bottom edge of the page. Oh my gosh, that even sounds confusing. Well, the point is we'd like to print this document on only 2 pages and not 4. So we want to pull these last 2 pages in so that they all fit right. Now, there's a couple of ways we could go about doing that. One thing we could do is to change the orientation of the page so that it all fits in landscape mode. Well, let's try that. Here from the Backstage View, we'll just go over here and click the orientation button and say landscape. Oh, that looks pretty good. Look at that. It goes right down to 2 pages. Here's the second page. That might have solved the problem. All right, well, let's just make things even more difficult for ourselves. Let's say that we don't want to go to landscape orientation. We really like portrait. We just want to make it fit right in there like that. Well, there's only 2 ways to do that. We're either going to have to give ourselves more breathing room on the page by making the margins more narrow, or we're going to have to squeeze in the data that's out here on this edge over here, squeeze it in so that it fits on that page. Well, let's try the margin route first. In the bottom right-hand corner, we're going to click on the Margins button. This allows us to see the margins as lines that crisscross here on the document. And we're just going to grab this line right here and drag it to the left. This is the left margin of the page. So we'll just drag it about halfway over. And we're going to do the same thing over here, setting the margins on this side to about 1/4 of an inch. Now, if you want more finite control over the margins than that, you can dial them in. We'll go down to the Margins button here and tell it Custom Margins. And then we'll just dial in the margin we want on the left. Let's go to, well, let's do 0.5. 0.5 here. And then we'll go over to the right. We can either spin that up or spin it down. Now, I'm not getting what I want. I want 0.5, and it's missing that with the spinners. So I'll just type it in, 0.5. Good. Hit OK. So we have 1/2 inch margins on the left, 1/2 inch margin on the right. That didn't solve the problem, I don't think, because we still see page 1 of 4. And if we go over to the right, sure enough, well, those guys are a little more narrow this time, but they still didn't snap into place. So the margins isn't going to solve the problem. Let's try something else. How about if we try to scale the document? This is where we're going to squeeze the stuff in so that it fits on 1 page. Now, the easiest way to do that is going to be from Page Break Preview. So let's get out of Backstage View, click on the Home tab, and then we'll use these 3 buttons here to navigate to one of the 3 views that's available to us. Right now we're in Normal View, and we want to go over to Page Break Preview. By the way, another way to do that would be to go to the View tab and choose Page Break Preview from right here. Well, what is Page Break Preview? Well, that allows us to adjust where the page breaks by dragging the blue dotted lines into position and snapping them where we want the page to break. So let's scroll down here just a little bit, and we'll see the watermark here that says page 1, page 2. These columns over here aren't wide enough to display the watermark, but we know that this is page 3 and this is page 4. So to adjust this, we'll take this dotted line and just drag it up and snap it into position right there above LA. And then we'll take this dotted line and pull it over to the right as far as we can go. And there you go. We've solved the problem. What we've done here is we've told Excel to squeeze in the edges so that everything fits in as page 1 and down here on page 2 as well. Now, I've been using the term squeeze things in, but what really happens here is Excel just makes the print smaller. It changes the font size so that everything fits exactly where you want it to go. Let's see what that looks like in Print Preview. Ah, look at that. Page 1 of 2. So something went right. Let's look at page 2. Lovely. That's exactly what we're looking for. Now we can turn off the margins here. Give us a better look at what things look like. Excellent. Okay, we have the page broken so that it's nice and even. We have 2 divisions on the first page, 2 divisions on the second page. What could we do to make this look better? Well, one of the things would be we could take the Muddy Run Rafting year-to-date report title that you see at the top here and have that print at the top of the second page as well. In fact, we'd want that to print at the top of any page we had, whether it's 2 pages or 10 pages. To do that, we're going to use something called the Print Title option. We'll get to that from the Page Layout tab. And in the Page Setup group, we'll just choose Print Titles. Now the green cells that you see in rows 1 and 2 are the titles that we want to print. We'll go down to the Print Titles part of this dialog box and then look for rows to repeat at top, because these are rows, they go across, as opposed to columns, which would go, down. So rows to repeat at top, we're just going to click right in there, and then we just take the mouse out here and we drag it down through the 1 and the 2. This puts in 1:2 with an absolute reference using $signs. Now you can click Print Preview right from here, and here you can see that page 1 has it, and so does page 2 right there. Lovely, that's just what we were looking for. By the way, did you notice the dialog box we ended up in to do that? Let's go back there to Page Layout tab again, and we'll click Print Titles again. And look at this. We're in the Page Setup dialog box on the Sheet tab. We've actually seen this before in the previous video. If we cancel out of there and go to Print Preview and then click the Page Setup button, look at that. It takes us to the same dialog box, Page Setup. And here we just go to the Sheet tab. So there's a couple ways to get to this, but there is a little warning here. When you're doing rows to repeat at top or columns to repeat at left, you can't set that up from Print Preview. Look at this. These guys are grayed out here, and you can't click in this. You can't make any changes. Other parts of the dialog box work just fine, but that particular item, working with rows to repeat at top and columns to repeat at left, you can't do that from within Print Preview. So you'd have to cancel out of here and go back to the Page Layout tab and access that right from here. Now you can get to it. You can work with it. Now you might think, that's kind of funny, but it makes sense if you think about it. Back in Print Preview, you're already previewing the documents with or without the titles at the top. And when you access that dialog box from here while you're still in Print Preview, basically you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You can't tell it to repeat the rows at top while you're already in Print Preview, because the rows that are repeated on the other pages don't even exist until the document prints. So that's why you have to get out of there and make the change right from the Page Layout tab. By the way, you could click this little dialog box launcher right here, and guess what? It takes you right back into that same dialog box. I know, 15 ways to do the same thing. Sometimes that can just get confusing.